Hello, I'm Dr. Aizaz from MedicoVisual.com, and in today's visual lecture we will talk about the development of bones. So previously in the first lecture of Rhombencephalon we had discussed the formation of Pontine flexure, that in the region of Rhombencephalon what happens that the roof plate it widens up, it splays open wide apart, and this leads to formation of this type of structure, and this is the floor of fourth ventricle. So if we look here, if we focus here in these cross sections, so this is the Pontine section area, this is the Pontine section cross section, Pontine areas cross section, and this is the medulla's cross section, embryonic cross section basically. So what we see is that there is this opening of roof plate, this is roof plate here as well. So this opening of roof plate, it leads to the formation of this type of structure, this type of arrangement of basal plate as well as alar plate. By the way, if you fail to understand this, please watch our previous lectures. We had discussed the details of alar plate, basal plate, and roof plate and all these structures previously. We actually have a full playlist of neuroembryology, and you can watch that to understand these things. I am adding more and more lectures to this playlist. So now this is the pons area. This is the pons area, and this is the medulla area. Now everything else is similar in pons as well as medulla section, except that in the region of pons something different happens here. So you see here is the formation of this rhombic lip. So this rhombic lip is basically the thickened dorsolateral part of alar plate. So dorsolateral extension of alar plate, you can say this is the rhombic lip, and again we have also discussed it previously. So this rhombic lip is actually going to form the cerebellum, and rest of the structures, they will form different nuclei of pons as well as medulla. In medulla there is no rhombic lip of course, but here there will be rhombic lip, and there will be the formation of these nuclei. Now these nuclei, their types is very similar, that here, and we have discussed it previously, that here is the general somatic efferent type of nucleus here as well as here as well as here, all these. So I will just label one of them, but you can understand that all these are quite similar, right? So this is general somatic efferent, and here we have general visceral efferent. Then this ventrally displaced, ventrally migrated, it special visceral efferent, and we do not have special somatic efferent, by the way. And this is the general visceral efferent, plus along with that we have the special visceral efferent. So both general as well as special visceral efferent. Then we have the general somatic efferent, right? And then we have special somatic efferent. If these terms sound alien to you, we have full lecture series on the explanation of this, the classification of peripheral nerve fibers. You can watch that, where I have explained these terms very logically, in a logical way, but I'm not gonna repeat them again because the lecture will become very long. So you can watch those lectures to understand these things. Now what we will do is that I will remove this rhombic plate because it is going to form cerebellum. We will only focus on this part actually, and now we will see that these are basically the types of, here I have written the types of nuclei, but now we will see what exact nucleus is there in the pons. Rather than types, now we will see their name and which nerve, by the way, which cranial nerve they do supply. We will also see that as well. So let's go to another 3D model where there will be no rhombic lip, and we will see one by one these nuclei, and further development of pons will be taken up on that 3D model. So here is another section of pons, and now we will see basically that the basal plate This here there was the basal plate, and basal plate, as we have discussed in previous lectures, that basal plate here as well, the basal plate formed the efferent type of nuclei, the motor nuclei. And then Alar plate, here as well we have Alar plate. Alar plate form the sensory or efferent types of nuclei, right? And here we have the here as well sulcus limitans, which demarcates, which differentiate the alar plate from the basal plate. So now let's start from the most medial end, that which nucleus we have. So if we go most medially, we have this nucleus, which is of course the medial most is what? It is the general somatic efferent. So this is general somatic efferent nucleus. It means that it is going to supply somatically derived muscles, I mean the skeletal muscles. So it is going to supply some skeletal muscles, right? So here which skeletal muscle? Specifically here it will be supplying the lateral rectus muscle, and this nucleus is basically the abducens nucleus. This is the abducens. Let me write it here. Abducens nucleus. This abducens nucleus is, as the name indicates, it is going to form the abducent nerve, which is going to supply the somatically derived extraocular muscle, the skeletal muscle of the eye, one of the extrinsic skeletal muscle of the eye, which is lateral rectus. You can remember it like this, LR6. This is sixth cranial nerve. Right, so this is the abducens nerve nucleus, which is a general somatic efferent type of nucleus in the pons. Basically, it is near the pontomedullary junction. It is near the junction of pons with the medulla. So this is the abducens nucleus. Then we have the other one is with general somatic efferent, we have the general visceral efferent. Now general visceral efferent means that it is going to supply viscera, and along with viscera it is going to supply glands. No matter whether the gland is superficial or deeply placed, the general visceral efferent is going to supply the gland, right? So here in this case, this nucleus is basically the superior salivatory nucleus. It is the superior, let me write it here, the superior, first it is general visceral efferent, and it is the superior salivatory nucleus. Now the previous one, this one, it was to supply the sixth nerve, but the superior salivatory nucleus, it will supply, it is actually one of the component. The seventh nerve has more than one component, so one of the general visceral efferent component of seventh nerve, that is supplied by superior salivatory nucleus. Now the superior salivatory nucleus, its fibers will ultimately go to two places. One, it is going to supply the submandibular and sublingual glands, right? These glands, plus it is also going to supply the lacrimal gland, the tear gland with which you cry. So with that reference, the superior salivatory nucleus has got another logical name. It is also called lacrimatory nucleus. Lacrimatory nucleus. Now I am deliberately not going into the details of its pathway, that how it is going to supply these glands and how it is going to join the nerve and all these details, because that is beyond the scope of embryology. Then we will delve deeper into neuroanatomy, which I do not want right now. I want to keep the lecture relatively simple and embryology oriented, right? So this is the superior salivatory nucleus, and it is also called lacrimatory nucleus. So if it is superior salivatory, then that means there must be a inferior salivatory nucleus as well. Otherwise, it should have been simply called salivatory nucleus. If we put the term superior, logically you should ask that where is inferior salivatory nucleus? Well, as it turns out, there is actually an inferior salivatory nucleus. So this nucleus, it supplies the submandibular and sublingual gland. So what about the parotid gland? So parotid gland is supplied by the inferior salivatory nucleus. So this was superior, this is inferior, and this inferior salivatory nucleus is not in pons, it is actually in medulla. I'm sorry for that. I actually forgot to mention this nucleus in the previous lecture of medulla. It actually it gave fibers to the ninth cranial nerve, which ultimately supplies. Ninth cranial nerve has lots of fibers going here and there, but one of its function is to supply the parotid gland, right? So yeah, superior salivatory and inferior salivatory, and superior salivatory is, by the way, also the lacrimatory. Then we have another ventrally displaced, ventrally migrated nucleus, that is the nucleus ambiguous. No, it is not nucleus ambiguous. It is the nucleus of facial nerve. It is similar to the nucleus ambiguous. It is special visceral efferent or brachiomotor nucleus, and it is going to supply the second pharyngeal arch derivatives muscle, which include the muscles of facial expression as well as some ear muscles. Let's not go into that, and that it does with the help of seventh cranial nerve. And the name of this nucleus is, it has a very logical name, that it is simply called facial nerve motor nucleus, or it is also called facial nerve proper nucleus. It is also called facial nerve brachiomotor nucleus. So basically it's a nucleus of facial nerve, right? With the help of facial nerve, it actually gives fibers to the facial nerve, which in turn is going to supply the motor fibers, motor innervation to the muscles of second pharyngeal arch, right? So this is the brachiomotor nucleus, special visceral efferent nucleus, and this is facial nerve proper nucleus or brachiomotor nucleus of facial nerve. So all these types of nuclei, they are motor nucleus, they are medial to sulcus limitans, and all these are derived from the basal plate. By the way, this is also derived from the basal plate. Initially it lies somewhat here in this region, lateral to the abducens nucleus, but ultimately it migrates like this and it comes here, and it also forms the facial colliculus. Let's not go into that in this lecture. So now let's talk about which part? The sensory part, the part that arises from the Alar plate, and that part, those nuclei, they are lateral, they are dorsolateral to sulcus limitans. Then first of all, of course, we will talk about which nucleus? General visceral efferent, not efferent, general visceral efferent as well as special visceral efferent, right? And this nucleus is actually no nucleus. I mean, in the pons, there is no special nucleus for special visceral efferent as well as general visceral efferent, but there is actually what I am saying. I mean that there is actually this nucleus, but this nucleus is the upward extension, the cranial extension of the same nucleus that is in the medulla, and the name of this nucleus is nucleus of tractus solitarius. So nucleus of tractus solitarius is relatively longer nucleus, right? So it has some of its part is hanging in the medulla, and other part is coming into the pons near the pontomedullary junction in the lower part of pons. So this nucleus of rectus solitarius, it spans from the lower part of pons to upper part of medulla. You can say its location is near the, not near, actually at, its location is at the pontomedullary junction. The pons, it leverages the power of, fibers of, not powers of. It leverages the fibers of nucleus of rectus solitarius, my favorite nucleus for some reason. This nucleus loves to taste, so this is nucleus of rectus solitarius. Seventh nerve gives some fibers to this nucleus, some taste fibers to this nucleus, right? So yeah, this is the nucleus of rectus solitarius. Then if we come more dorsolaterally, then we have yet another nucleus that we have also discussed previously, and this huge nucleus, it is actually the nucleus of our beloved pons. And what I mean by this is that it has three parts, and its principal part, it lies in almost in the mid or center of the pons. So for example, if the pons is like this, and here let's say medulla starts, this is the pontomedullary junction, this was the lower section of pons. So almost here, this is the mid of pons. So it has this principal nucleus, and then the upward cranial extension, which is mesencephalic extension or mesencephalic nucleus, and downward extension, which is the spinal nucleus. Here as well, principal nucleus, mesencephalic, and spinal nucleus. And what is the name of this nucleus? We have already discussed it. It is the principal. This is principal, by the way, and this is spinal. Let's write it like this, that it is the sensory nuclear complex. All these three, these are the sensory nuclear complex of trigeminal nerve. Right, so this is the sensory nuclear complex of trigeminal nerve, which consists of principal, mesencephalic, and the spinal nucleus, right? So this is the general somatic efferent nucleus, and finally we have the special somatic efferent. And again, the good news is that nothing new here as well. So we had discussed the vestibulocochlear nuclear complex in the lecture of medulla, and there we had seen that it has these cochlear nuclei and the vestibular nuclei, and especially the superior part, medial part, and lateral part. Medial and lateral in this section will be highly prominent. Medial and lateral nuclei of vestibular nuclear complex will be highly prominent, and the ventral cochlear nucleus, that will also be prominent in this section, while the other parts, they will be seen in the sections of medulla, right? So that was almost all about the nuclei in the pons, but except that there is one more important nucleus, which is the trigeminal nerve. It has to supply the some muscles as well, some brachiomotor fibers to the muscles of mastication, which arise from pharyngeal arch. And which pharyngeal arch? Don't ask me, I forgot that. So anyhow, the muscles of mastication, they are also the brachiomotor, brachially derived, pharyngeal arch derived muscles, right? So we have another nucleus, which is the motor nucleus of trigeminal, and this nucleus is also going to supply the motor nucleus of trigeminal nerve. Of course, it is brachiomotor type of nucleus or special visceral efferent type of nucleus, and it is going to give the fibers to the fifth cranial nerve or trigeminal nerve. It is another name of trigeminal nerve, right? So if you see carefully, we have this, let's hide it for a second, upper section. So here I have put the medulla here. So if we compare these with medulla, we have very similar arrangement. You can see that there is that column-like arrangement, that if there is this column of general somatic efferent, here is the column of general somatic efferent medial most. So if we talk about horizontal plane, these nuclei will be lying in almost, not horizontal, if we talk about, I mean the vertical plane, you can see that their horizontal plane is different, but their vertical plane will be same. I mean, if we draw the columns like this, so for example, if we draw the column, this will be the column of general somatic efferent, then this will be the column of special visceral efferent, and here this will be the column of, what is this, visceral efferent, this is special visceral efferent, and so on. You see, this is column like arrangement. They are in the same vertical plane, right? They are in the same vertical plane. For example, here the general somatic efferent in pons, in the lower pons, is which nucleus? It is the abducens nucleus. But the same general somatic efferent nucleus in the medulla, it is the hypoglossal nerve nucleus, 12th cranial nerve nucleus. And if we talk about general visceral efferent in pons, it is the superior salivatory or lacrimatory nucleus. But in medulla we have two, the dorsal nucleus of vagus here, the dorsal nucleus of vagus, which is going to supply 10th cranial nerve, and cranial to that we have another general visceral efferent nucleus, which is the inferior inferior salivatory. It's not lacrimatory, I'm sorry about that, that was totally a tongue slip. So this is inferior salivatory nucleus, which is going to supply the salivary gland, that is parotid gland, one of the salivary gland. The other two are supplied by superior salivatory nucleus. Then we have the nucleus of rectus solitarius, which is not divided into two rows. It's a continuous nucleus like this, and then we have the other two that we have already discussed. So yeah, I think that was all about the nuclei, and important details are covered up till now. Few more things that we will discuss, and if you want to stick to and learn those minor details, you can stick, otherwise you can just skip those details and you can click back and watch something else if you want. So anyhow, so here I have put other part of the pons. Now you see that we have discussed previously that there is the reticular formation that spans throughout the brainstem. So of course there will be the reticular formation here as well. So reticular formation, as we have discussed previously, it is mainly derived from the basal plate, but some contribution might be there from the alar plate, right? So this was about the reticular formation. Then we have some special nuclei here as well, and these are derived from alar plate. And some authors, by the way, they believe that the Pontine nuclei, they are actually formed by that dorsolateral extension of alar plate that form the cerebellum. What was the name of that extension? Rhombic lip. So some authors believe that these Pontine nuclei, they develop from the alar plate. So you know, alar plate is placed very dorsolaterally, somewhat here that will be there, somewhat here like this. So here we can draw it like this. So basically these nuclei, they develop either from alar plate, the main part of alar plate, or this dorsolateral extension of alar plate. So then after the development, they then migrate ventrally like this. So they migrate from here, they migrate ventrally, or they migrate anteriorly, right? So what is their function? Actually they have the connection with the cerebellum and as well as the cerebrum, and even they have the connection with spinal cord as well. So here is the, you can see the fibers, basically they are coming from the cerebral cortex, which I haven't shown in this 3D model, but if I draw for you, so somewhat here there will be the cerebral cortex. So these fibers, they are coming from the cerebral cortex like this, and they are going to the Pontine nuclei. They will synapse with the Pontine nuclei, and then from there we have the at the posterolateral side we have what? We have our beloved what's that? You know what's that? I forgot its name. Yeah, that is cerebellum. So we have this coordination organ called cerebellum. So these fibers, they will synapse here, and second order neuron from the Pontine nuclei, they will arise from the Pontine nuclei. Their cell body and dendrites are in the Pontine nuclei, and their fibers, they will go laterally as well as dorsally to ultimately reach the cerebellum. So basically Pons is connecting the cerebrum with cerebellum and even spinal cord with cerebellum. So that is why it is said that Pons is the bridge. Actually the word pons mean bridge. It means bridge, right? So I hope you are clear about this. Now, yeah, that was all about Pons, I think. What else we have to discuss? No, that was all. That's great. So I hope you understood this. Now finally, again, as we did in the previous lecture, we will play the game. But before that, let me tell you something. Let's talk briefly about, although this is not the topic of Pons, but it will really help you understand the placement of nuclei here. So we will briefly, I would like to talk about the cranial nerves origin in this lecture, so that it will be a piece of cake for you to understand the placement of nuclei. So let's draw a very simple Dr. Najib style diagram. That here we have what? This is the midbrain, and we have midbrain, then we have pons and medulla, right? So again here as well, medulla, and medulla we have the mid part here, then we have the pyramid here, and then we have what? We have the olive here. So this is pyramid here as well, and this is the olive, this as well. So now if we talk about the third cranial nerve, I think I should draw another diagram as well. So yeah, let's draw another diagram from side view. So third cranial nerve and third and fourth cranial nerve, they arise from what? They arise from midbrain. So this is third cranial nerve. Here also third cranial nerve will arise from midbrain. And fourth cranial nerve, it arises from back side of midbrain, like this. Here as well, from the back side of midbrain, fourth cranial nerve. Here I can show it like this. This is the fourth cranial nerve. Then the fifth cranial nerve, as it is quite evident from this diagram, that it's from this 3D model, that principal Pontine nucleus of the fifth cranial nerve, the trigeminal nerve, it is in the center of the pons, mid part of the pons. And its motor nucleus is also in the mid part in the column of nucleus ambiguous and facial nerve proper nucleus, basically the brachiomotor column or special visceral efferent column. So because its nuclei are in the mid of pons, so this nerve, it will also arise from the mid of pons. This is the fifth cranial nerve. Again, it will divide into 3 divisions. Let's not go into that. That is the topic of neuroanatomy. So fifth cranial nerve will arise from here. Then we have sixth cranial nerve, and as I've told you that the abducens nerve nucleus is the medial most. So that is why it will arise, although it will arise from the pons. Let's draw pontomedullary junction as well here. So here is the pontomedullary junction. So it will arise from the pons, but near the pontomedullary junction at the lower part of the pons. at the pontomedullary junction. So this nerve is sixth cranial nerve. So it will arise somewhat from here. Sixth cranial nerve. Then seventh cranial nerve will arise lateral to it, like this. And eighth cranial nerve is most lateral. In the 3D model that we have discussed previously, we had seen previously, the nuclei arrangement is just like this origin of these nerves. So here we can draw it like this, that this is sixth, this is seventh, and here is eighth, right? So if we draw the pontomedullary junction, at the lateral most is the eighth cranial nerve, then medial to it is seventh, and the most medial is sixth cranial nerve. Then if we talk about the 12th cranial nerve, it is arising from the medulla, of course, and it arises, of course, most medially, as its nucleus is general somatic efferent column in the general somatic efferent column, and this column is medial most, so it will also arise most medially somewhat here. There will be 12th cranial nerve between the pons and olive. This one is 12th cranial nerve. Then lateral to olive we have the origin of ninth cranial nerve here as well, ninth cranial nerve superiorly, then inferior to it is 10th cranial nerve here as well, inferior to it is 10th cranial nerve, and inferior most is 11th cranial nerve here as well, inferior most is 11th cranial nerve. So this is the medullary part of 11th cranial nerve. Of course, there is the spinal part as well, which is coming from much lower from the spinal cord. Not much lower from the spinal cord, actually from the spinal cord, so that's why I said much lower. Basically, it's in the cervical region, right? So on this diagram, we have medial most is 12th cranial nerve, then we have 9th, 10th, and 11th cranial nerve, and there is this spinal part as well, which is also contributing to 11th cranial nerve. So if you understand this diagram, by the way, please draw it as well. So if you understand this diagram, then you can easily understand the placement of the nuclei in the brainstem, and this will cover both the neuroanatomy as well as neuroembryology and even the neurophysiology as well. So let's play this beautiful game that I've created for you on wordwall.net. So let's try to fill these. So basal plate, from basal plate we know that most medially we have the general somatic efferent nucleus, which is abducens nerve nucleus or abducens nucleus simply. Then lateral to it we have general visceral efferent column, which in pons is formed by the superior salivatory or lacrimatory nucleus. By the way, if you don't know and if you haven't assumed already, it's very logical to understand that inferior salivatory nucleus is also formed by basal plate. It's very easy to understand. Then we have a ventrally displaced facial nerve proper nucleus, and in the mid pons region we have again a anteriorly or ventrally displaced nucleus, which is in the same column as facial nerve nucleus proper. I mean the special visceral efferent column or brachiomotor column. That nucleus is, where is that nucleus? Here, motor nucleus of trigeminal nerve. And finally, reticular formation. It is formed by mainly by basal plate with some contribution from the Alar plate. Then if we come to Alar plate, we have at the just medial side we have which nucleus? Nucleus of rectus solitarius, which is actually the nucleus of medulla, but it has that upward extension as well. Can we say it is the nucleus of medulla? Well, technically not. It is the nucleus of both. Both can claim ownership. Both pons and medulla both can claim ownership on nucleus of tractus solitarius and even on the spinal nucleus of trigeminal as well. We will put that later. Yeah, we can put it here, right? It's turn of the general somatic efferent, right? And this is the general visceral efferent, not efferent, general visceral efferent as well as special visceral efferent, both, right? Then we have the vestibular nuclear complex as well as cochlear nuclei, and finally the pontine nuclei, which are derived presumably from the dorsolateral extension of the Alar plate, which is the rhombic lip. So this is the pontine nucleus. So I think that was all. Let's check our answer. Wow, all these are correct again. So you can also play this game. I will put the link in description. So that was all about the development of pons. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have a great day. Goodbye.